Hello. I'm just gonna wait a couple minutes for people to file in, I mean. Hi everyone. Welcome. Happy Sunday. I hope everyone's had a good weekend so far. Hi everyone. Good to see you all. My name is Laura. Hi Carrie. Hi Rawls Galaxy. Hi there. My name is Laura, and as you all probably know if you've been following me for a while, I'm an advocate for mental health. I'm also a grad student in clinical psychology, and I've been hosting these amazing conversations with one of my friends, Michelee, who's just an amazing person. I'll let her introduce herself when she pops in here. But basically, we've been doing some of these conversations. We've been doing a conversation every week, every Sunday, around the themes of racism, around the themes of mental health, and how mental health can either be damaged by racism, or how the mental health field can perpetuate racism. And so we've been talking a lot about that. If you've missed previous episodes, I want you to go to Michelee's page right after this conversation, and you can find all the episodes there. I actually am super not technologically savvy, and what happened when I tried to upload the episodes was that my phone crashed, and Instagram just doesn't want me to upload these episodes for some reason. So I'm gonna fingers crossed, really hope that Instagram lets me upload this episode, but if not, we will definitely have more. Every single Sunday we'll have these conversations. In the past, we've had conversations about compassion fatigue, how Asians can really advocate for Black Lives Matter, how to really understand what's going on in terms of trauma, vicarious trauma, intergenerational trauma relating to all the stuff that's going on. Just tons of different themes that we've been talking about. So please check those old episodes out, and we'll continue having them, because I think that anti-racism is not just a one-time thing or a 2-week thing, but it should be ongoing for life, basically. So I'm gonna let Michelee in. This works. Yeah, technology is not my friend these days. But yeah, as we're kind of waiting. Oh, there she is.
Sorry.
We're not waiting anymore.
Sorry about that.
No worries. Good to see you.
Fine. How are you?
I'm good. I'm actually feeling really refreshed and energized today. So
Good.
happy about that. Yeah. How are you? How's your
That-
mental health lately?
it's been pretty good. I've just had to, I'm learning as I go through this journey. I have to keep an eye on it, and I have to keep an eye on my thoughts and be aware of when the negative starts creeping in. But I must say it's been a pretty good week.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that. And I think you're so right about just kind of checking in with ourselves from time to time, especially
Right.
where it feels like we're kind of fighting this war right now, right?
Yes.
Racism. And so I think it's so important for people to remember that we can't really fight with an empty cup.
No.
So that's so real. But yeah,
Yeah.
I'm super glad to see you.
You as well.
I've
I know
never
you've been really busy doing so many things.
Yeah. If anyone hasn't been kind of tuning into my stories, I'm in the middle of a move right now, and
Yeah.
stuff scattered all over my apartment. And that's why we had to cancel our last episode last week.
Right.
But I'm super excited to be back. I feel like
I know.
I missed these conversations.
I'm sure everybody's super excited to have you back. I know I am.
Oh, that's so sweet. Anyways, we have a really exciting conversation planned out.
Yes.
And yeah, I think the intent of these conversations is to really make it just a free-flowing conversation where we can
Definitely.
connect with each other. I know I
Right.
really look forward to these conversations, but we
Me too.
have certain themes that we try to cover each week.
Mhm.
And Michelee and I both, I think we have a lot to say about these things.
Always.
Sometimes we don't.
I'm like, I don't think we'll I'll ever run out of stuff to say for the show.
Exactly. And this stuff is so important, and there's just such
Right.
abundance of stuff to say for this show. But yeah, why don't we kind of start with introducing ourselves? Do you want to introduce yourself?
Okay, sure. If you don't mind, I would like to start with Drapetomania because that's what we promised them last time. So I'll introduce myself and then you, and then I'll go into it whenever you're ready.
Yeah.
But my name is Michelee Smith-Tynes. I am a journalist. I am a teacher. I'm an author. You can find my book, Taming the Beast of Anxiety, on Amazon. And the trick about that book is I use it myself. I definitely practice what I preach. I use my own book. My book was a resource for me, so I thought to share it with others. And we are on this journey just to try to discover more about ourselves, but we have to do that by interacting with each other.
Definitely. Yeah. I love how you said that you also use your book. Like I do. So many people out there that like give advice, and I'm so guilty of this too. When I'm like working with clients, I'll give them tons of advice, and then I'll be like, right, I should really follow it.
I know, like that was really good. Maybe I should listen to that.
Yeah, exactly. I love how you practice what you preach. I'll just do a little short intro. I kind of introduced myself before you hopped on here, but my name is Laura, and I'm actually a graduate student studying clinical psychology. So I hope to become a clinical psychologist one day. And one of the things that I'm really passionate about and forever will be passionate about is bringing in a culturally aware and culturally informed lens into mental health. And I think just this movement has been a huge wake-up call and a reminder for me to realize how, like, to what extent that really means.
Yes.
And so these conversations really help me out to realize, like, oh, what are some of the stuff that I've learned that I have to learn about mental health and relearn? Right. Who can I kind of learn from?
Right.
So I'm super lucky to learn from you, Michelee, because I feel like conversations have aided my education just so much.
Thank you. Thank you. That's so awesome. That's a blessing. Aww. As I've said before, I feel like this is providing with me with an opportunity to step into my life purpose and my life mission, you know, to help and to serve others. Mm-hmm. And our conversations definitely help me as well, because I think a lot of times people think that because the issues are largely affecting Black people, that Black people always know what to do. And I'm here to tell you we don't. Like the example of when I showed you what I had texted to my workmates, and I was so nervous about how that was going to go over and everything. Yeah. Like that's a process. That's learning a process and learning to speak up and learning that I don't have to silence myself anymore. So this is helpful for me too.
Yeah, and I love that. I think that's so admirable to, can you just share a little bit about what?
Sure. And I will share a little bit about that. So yesterday obviously was July 4th here in America, and the country celebrates its independence, which in some ways it's still not independent from, you know, Britain. It thinks it is, but it's in many ways not. So that's one thing. Mm-hmm. But also people that look like me are still not free. We don't have freedom of movement. We don't have even freedom of thought. So obviously a lot of times I feel silenced at work in different times. And so a lot of people were kind of, you know, sending their 4th of July things, and I'm not going to say it triggered me, but it put me in a situation to where I'm like, I now need to stand up, and you're representing who you are, and that's fine. You can send happy 4th of July. So I sent a Black Lives Matter meme, and it said, or graphic rather, and it said, Black Lives Matter is not political or a sensitive issue. It is a humanity issue. And I've been preaching that since George Floyd, that it's when I talk about my race, it's not a political issue. That's how I get silenced when somebody immediately says that. Yeah. And so what I told them was that, people like me are still not free in this country. And I said some more things about what I had sent. Mm-hmm. And then, I was just so nervous about how it was going to go over. I was like, it's like one of those moments where you're like, oh, send, and it's like, it's done. You
And
can't take
like
it back.
waiting.
Yeah, I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I did it, and it's done. And
Awesome.
several of them responded and they just kind of hearted it or whatever. But there are so many buzzwords, like even God bless America.
Mm,
To me, even when I was a staunch Christian, I always wondered, why not God bless the world? Like, why can't God bless all of us?
yeah.
It's these little buzzwords and these limiting things. My patriotism is not going to be the same as the patriotism of others. And then, of course, your post was phenomenal because it
Yeah.
started with how Black people still are not free, and so many other things that I personally hadn't considered, like how fireworks can trigger some people's PTSD,
Yeah.
and how an abundance of food can be a problem. So when I posted it, I said, we need to be mindful of one another. We need to just be mindful humans.
Yeah.
Forget about your race or your nationality. Just be a mindful human,
Yeah.
respect someone else and where they are, and how they're coming to the table. Respect them as, an individual.
Yeah, and like how some holidays, especially like July 4th, can be so hard and so triggering and such
Triggering, yeah.
a reminder for some people. I love that the KP experience. I love your
Yeah.
comments there. He said all countries matter, which
I
is
know, right? I saw that.
so ironic.
He said Happy Canada Day too.
I think this kind of goes into this is kind of a joke that goes into the idea of like all lives matter, and how
Yes.
a lot of people, when they see all Black Lives Matter out there, they say something like, oh, all lives matter, like
Right.
children's lives matter, white lives matter, and we
Right.
know that those lives matter. They already matter. But what we're talking about is the lives that have not mattered for so long, right?
Exactly.
So,
When George Floyd happened, I promise you, I was like, all lives matter. Where you at? Where are you at? We need all hands on deck right now. Where are you at?
yeah,
I'm reaching out to people. I don't care what race you are, especially if you're an American where this George Floyd situation happened. You should be sickened, no matter what race you are. I did an interview with someone in India yesterday, and I mean, it is a shame to me that my country would behave this way.
yeah,
That's what patriotism is to me. Me wanting my country to live up to its promise.
yeah.
We have to redefine these things.
Yeah, and I love that you brought in patriotism, because I think that it's not like patriotism doesn't mean just blindly agreeing with everything
Right.
it does and like cheering them
Right.
on. It's really holding a magnifying glass to your country's values and seeing if your country's actions really line up with those values. And
Right.
I don't see there anything wrong when people say like, oh, you know what, the United States actually doesn't stand for like X, Y, and Z through their actions. How can we be better, right? And how can we make this
Exactly.
place?
I love that question. As a teacher, of course, that's when I put my teacher hat on. How can we do better? Because I want America to live up to its promise.
Yeah.
Yesterday, if anybody wants to check out my feed, one of the videos that I did, in addition to the one that I did on your post, was about the 13th Amendment. And I guess some would call it a loophole. It's not a loophole. It specifically says, and I'm paraphrasing here, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall exist in the United States except as punishment for a crime. Now, when that happens, everybody falls under slavery. Any criminal falls under slavery. But when you look at the entire picture and you realize that in America, African Americans, I want to say, are enslaved,
Yeah.
but I'm going to say are incarcerated at 5 times the rate of whites. It becomes a completely different picture. It actually becomes rollover racism if you look at it, rollover slavery. That's all it is. Whew, I love that. I'm going to start calling it that, rollover slavery.
Yeah, roll over slavery. I think that's so
Yeah.
accurate, right? And it's so it's so relevant to mental health too, because in incarcerated populations, the rates of mental illness and mental health are like astounding. And they're so high up there. And we can't ignore the fact that Black Americans or Black people in general are getting disproportionately incarcerated by the system.
Definitely.
And this comes down to like racial profiling by the police. This comes down to
Yes.
the
Trumped up charges. Trumped up charges.
Yep. And how like money and privilege and power that often correlates with being white will
Yes.
set you free. Like bail, for example, the very existence that there is bail, which means that like if you have money, you can be free. That is problematic.
Right.
That's
right.
fueling into this like, yeah, just this cycle of like the rich are free and the poor aren't. And oftentimes we have to realize, well, why are people of color categorized as poor? Well, it's these systems that kind of maintain this.
Systematically. This is where we get systemic racism.
Definitely.
It is planned and it is intentional. No person wants to live in poverty, but it's planned that Black people are. So we get this question from Marcel Figueres. I'm so sorry if I didn't pronounce that correctly, but he says, "Hey girls, what do you have to say about the cancel culture? Should one be fired or canceled even if the guilty verdict is not out yet?" Okay, we have discussed cancel culture in previous videos, right, Laura?
Yeah.
But I will say that depends on who you ask. And as humans, we're going to have to start getting used to that. I am a teacher by profession and by life mission. So I am the person that you can come to and ask questions. Most Black people, a lot of Black people are tired of this happening generation after generation after generation. And they figure you should go get a book and figure it out yourself. I'm not like that. If you want to DM me a question, you can feel free to do that. However, I know I will mention a specific case in which there were, I believe, 2 white girls that had blackface on, and they were expelled from their university. I really don't think they should have been expelled. That's my opinion as a Black person. However, I do think they should have been educated as to why blackface is offensive to Black people.
Yeah.
If people don't know, and we have to understand, not just the American government, but many governments are expecting us to be ignorant of history. In some cases, there are some groups that want to start a race war. Yeah. They want for people to be fueled by ignorant emotion, is what I'm going to call it. Yeah. Just hair trigger personalities where they'll just go off the deep end and they'll react without thinking. Yeah. Once you know history, then you can begin to understand why Black people don't want to talk about this anymore. We've given up our lives. We've done sit-ins. We've done boycotts. So you can catch one of our previous videos. We did discuss cancel culture, but if you have any further questions, feel free to DM me on that.
That's a beautiful answer, Michelee.
Yeah.
For taking some time to explain it. And I'll just say to you that I think it's so admirable and something that's kind of, it's not expected for you to be open to DMs, for you to be open to questions. And when people, if anyone's out there just wanting to ask more questions, you can feel free, but make sure to also know that that's something that Michelee is doing on her time. She's not getting for any of this. And there are questions that can be worded in a way to not be like attacking, or to make sure that you're coming from a place of genuine curiosity as well. I think that question about cancel culture is so real because I think, as we discussed in the previous video, we're living in times where like the internet is really dictating our culture and is making just like allowing narratives in our culture to be led into certain directions. Like I've seen companies just get like completely boycotted because of actions that they've made.
Now tell me what you think about this. I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but I want to know what you think because of the loophole in the 13th Amendment. There are corporations that benefit from this slave labor. That's what I'm going to call it, because that's what it is, because that's what our country's 13th Amendment calls it. It's slave labor. So I had sent you a video a while ago of a young man who works for FedEx, and he had been spat upon and called the N-word. And I mean, just his emotion was so visceral. I could feel it. I feel like companies like that should be offering hazard pay for their Black employees.
Totally.
I feel like they are benefiting from, number one, paying these people that are doing such manual labor. They're paying them pennies in the first place, really, for what it's doing to their bodies.
Totally.
That's why they can hire many people. And then in the end, for them to be abused by the same system that's imprisoning their brothers and sisters, that to me doesn't seem right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would have to agree with you, Michelee. I was shocked when I did my research and found out that some of the companies that I love are prison labor.
Like Whole Foods, I was like,
oh, no way. I didn't know Whole Foods was too.
Yes.
I totally understand from a company perspective, from a business perspective, but that does not make it right. You know, when they're using, because prison labor is essentially labor where they force prisoners who are disproportionately Black and, you know, Hispanic and people of color to work for like pennies. They have to do it because they're in prison, right? And because society treats them as criminals. And so when you're thinking about it from a company perspective, it makes a lot of sense because you're saving so much money. You don't have to pay anyone minimum wage. You know, you're cutting costs and you're getting your productivity up. But I think that to me is like the definition of slavery, essentially.
Exactly.
People have no choice but to work and are paid like little to nothing the amount of work that they do. And so I 100% agree with you. Companies like Victoria's Secret, Starbucks, I mean,
FedEx,
huge difference, in my opinion, between cancel culture and accountability culture. And my friend Devra, who's at Candid Couch Therapy, she makes a great post about this. She says that accountability culture is important so that we uphold these companies and brands and even people with huge influence to realize how their actions may be wrong and how their actions may be harmful, and hold them accountable to their actions. But once they realize these wrong actions and once they take accountability for their actions and, you know, try to restore the harm that they caused, we can, I mean, this is my opinion and my opinion only, but I think I have space in my heart to say, like, okay, you didn't know any better, or you did know better, but now your mind has changed. You realize the harm that you caused. Now, what are you going to do to reflect on
what are you going to do?
Make it different?
Maya Angelou, when you know better, you do better.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
And I'm going to say it's impossible for one company or one human being to know absolutely everything. I've learned a lot. I'm going to own up to the mistake that I made a couple weeks ago, Michelee, that you brought up to me, where you said, like, oh, I actually don't appreciate being called a Black advocate. And so it's super important for us to kind of model the fact that we make mistakes, and we can, what we do with that mistake is important, right? Kind of own up to
and then also for me to explain, because see, that's where it comes down to having a human relationship, because I had to explain, because then I realized, I said, you know, Black is essence, Black is ether, but somebody might be left wondering, well, why doesn't she want to be called a Black advocate? You know, so then I felt like I had to take the responsibility to stand completely in my truth. You know what I'm saying? So that I could make sure that you understand what I'm saying, so that there are no misunderstandings. And that takes commitment, I think. That takes commitment from both parties, for you to fully hear what I'm saying and for me to fully stand in my truth. You know, so I also want to say that I believe I saw Whole Foods on the list, If it wasn't on the list, I'm apologizing now. And I feel, trust me, you guys should know by now, I'm real good with retractions. I will definitely let you know next week. And if FedEx is not on the list, I will definitely let you know next week. But there are companies out there, and we just need to be aware of how we're spending our money, what we're doing with our dollars, which are taxed anyway. So it's like this big intertwined system that we have to know and appreciate,
Exactly.
You have to at least appreciate it for being whatever it is so that you can learn how to function within it.
Yeah, exactly. Kevin said Whole Foods is on that list. You were correct.
See, okay. I remember some things.
I'm seeing a lot of questions in the comments.
Okay.
And unfortunately, I think sometimes for me personally, I miss out on some of those questions because the comments are so fast and I'm really asking. So
do you want to get to those, and then after we do that, then I'll explain Drapetomania just because I promised them. Okay,
sure.
Go.
And I just want to say before I do that, there is also a question box. I think I set that up. I'm not super tech savvy, but there's a question box
always
down
there
below. And if we miss out on your question, or if you just have a really pressing question to ask, feel free to drop that into the question box. And if we don't get to it today, we'll be sure to get to it in next week's.
Like Marcel, you've got a lot of questions and we're going to try to get to you. But if we don't, please feel free to inbox me. I'm fine with that.
Yes. Okay. Let me check. So Healing Reminders has a question. I'd love to hear your thoughts on anti-racist approaches to mental health.
Okay. Well, that's sliding right into Drapetomania.
Yeah.
We have to understand that systems are created. When we talk about systemic racism, we're talking about the racism that's bred into the systems that are created. So this is perfect for me to talk about Drapetomania and why some white people and other races don't understand why Black people get upset. Now, I'm going to say this is directly from Organic Therapy Network. Please follow them on Instagram. This is directly from their account, and I'll make sure that I tag them. This is not from me. So it says, Fake Mental Health News, a brief account of pseudo mental health diagnoses throughout history that have negatively impacted minority communities. Mental health has also been affected by institutional racism and sexism. Historically, scientists would create fake diagnoses and research to justify keeping minorities inferior. This includes the thought that Black people do not feel pain. Yes, that was inbred into the system. So continuing with this post, it says Drapetomania, a mental illness of slaves, the desire of slaves to run away. A runaway slave is suffering from mania or is mad or crazy. This was trumped up by Samuel A. Cartwright in 1851. Here's the recommended intervention: beating the devil out of them as a preventative measure. So notice right there, we're combining religion. Notice that we're combining religion with abuse. Amputation of the toes is also suggested. And then it's called, I want to pronounce it correctly, dysphagia atopecia. Explains the apparent lack of work ethic exhibited by many slaves. Well, they're enslaved. What are we thinking is going to happen? The diagnosable symptoms included disobedience, insolence, and refusing to work, and physical lesions, which were probably promulgated by their owners. Recommended intervention: put the patient to hard kind of work in the open air and sunshine under the watchful eye of a white man. So keep in mind that puts the white person as telling the narrative, again, of a person of color. Why does it still matter today? This is why this whole post is ingenious. Historical and contemporary instances of negative treatment have led to a mistrust of authorities, many of whom are not seen as having the best interests of Black and African Americans in mind. Now, see, okay, so that's what was from Organic Therapy. We have to understand, even when it comes to therapy, a lot of people don't understand that just 1 or 2 generations removed, Black people would never go to therapy. They would say you're putting your business out in the street, but there are still these inbred thoughts. There are these subconscious thoughts that get transferred from generation to generation, whereas you're going to be seen as, insane.
Yeah.
They already see you as insane. So we have to think this is the foundation. This is the foundation upon which this system is built. And that being the case, we have to systematically strip the system of those thoughts and behaviors. If not, create a new system. That's what people don't understand.
100%. Yes, Michelle.
Yes.
Speech. And I think
I worked up a sweat with that one, girl. I worked up a sweat.
I don't blame you. This is an important topic. I don't blame you at all. And I think what the key thing you said there, what is key, what I hope that everyone takes away, if they take away one thing from this whole talk, is that it's the system. It's the foundation that has formed like everything. And in that definition of everything is the mental health institution, right? And so for me, in this kind of learning journey, I've had to go back and I've literally looked into my syllabus and how I've been taught how to do therapy, how I've been taught different theories of psychology, and looked into like who were the people writing these theories, who are the people that are developing these therapies and interventions, who are the people that are creating the DSM. And I'm sad to say it, but it's like 95% old white males.
Indeed, my friend. Indeed.
And it's hard to create something or to theorize something that is separate from your bias, right?
Exactly.
From of white supremacy if you're an old white male. And I think just talking about like the DSM and some of the things that are problematic in the DSM, like homosexuality was in the DSM.
Yes, it was, as a mental disorder.
As a mental disorder. We're pathologizing things that are entirely just like normal and human.
Right. Well, keep in mind, I had a conversation with Trauma Focused Therapy. Be sure to follow them, guys. A couple weeks ago about hysteria and histrionics. They thought that just a woman's normal functioning intuition, I believe it was intuition that they did not like. That's my opinion. That they classified that as a woman being hysterical. And if you look at movies from the 40s and 50s, you'll be amazed at how many women get slapped and, oh, this is that female talk again. And all of these other types of things. These things are inbred still into, I believe, into the DSM. And, you're doing the right thing by, having your spidey senses like, this doesn't quite sound right. You know what I'm saying? Because this is how, I'm honestly going to say my opinion is it's how people were controlled. It was a way to control people. It was a way to put a label on them and threaten them with a straitjacket, And so we have to be aware of the history of these systems that we operate in and decide if that's the way we're still going to go. Yeah.
And I agree with you. I think that, the way we treated people that didn't fit into what we thought society was supposed to look like meant pathologizing them and fixing them and trying to throw treatments and sometimes really inhumane treatments on them.
But this is all systems, though. I will say, like, we really need to, as Americans, we need to research the history of Native Americans. There was a whole period of time where children, and this may sound familiar because the time is repeating itself, children were taken from their parents, their hair, which was considered their source of energy and life. And it was very sacred to them. Everyone's hair was cut and they were given a very standardized European look. and they had no nurturing, no care except for one another.
Yeah.
And so when we deal with people, like I said, as humans, we have to think about these things.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And I want to go back to the question that was originally asked, how can we
Yes.
incorporate anti-racist or anti-oppressive approaches in mental health? And I think, we've kind of explored what oppressive approaches look like. And frankly, that's almost everything in the field of mental health. And I will say that it's super important to start listening to people of color, to start listening
Yes.
to, academics and theorists,
Right.
people with lived experience who are Black, who are Latino or Latinx, who have been marginalized and
Yes.
and listen to them and how
Hmm.
they want to be treated when it comes to mental illness.
Hmm.
And I think that's essential. I listened to a webinar not too long ago, and it's on YouTube. So it's a wonderful thing to check out. It's called Social Work So White. And one of the speakers on there is Rachel Cargle, who's like one of my absolute heroes.
Hmm.
And she was really talking about like trying to incorporate everything down to like the training of how we train mental health professionals, like the
Hmm.
way these voices need to be amplified and
Hmm.
over amplified, frankly, because we've really silenced them in the past, and start listening to
Definitely.
them and start kind of, yeah, just incorporating different perspectives, and I think a lot of the mental health system right now is on this biomedical approach of like, we're going to diagnose this thing as a disease, but we need to understand that that's on a system of Western medicine.
Yes.
Brought up Native Americans. I
Hmm.
know just a little bit about how, for some of those perspectives, they really see health as holistic, right? And it incorporates
Yes.
spirituality, and the body and the mind, just all
Yes.
things. And I think that,
Yes.
yeah, we just really need to like be mindful and just start criticizing some of the things that we're learning.
Yes. And that brings me to another point. I'm a teacher, and I think that a lot of times we get caught up in our own world. We need more forums where we're dealing with multidisciplinary approaches. What does a teacher think about this? What does a lawyer think about it? What does a therapist think about it? What does a psychiatrist think? We need to combine the efforts of these people of different genders and different races, different professions, different religions, so
Mm-hmm.
that we can get a true picture of ourselves as humans, not to label one another. That's another thing. I'm not sure, but it seems like the entire purpose of the statistical manual, which is what it is called,
Yeah.
is to numberize people.
Yeah.
And that's what's happened with education. We have AYP, and we have, you got to get your students to a certain score by a certain time. And now students are numbers.
Yeah.
We need to return to humanity and humanizing people. That's what I think.
100%. Yeah, I love that word human because I think that that's
Mhm.
something that we can all relate to, and that's something
Right.
so raw and true and powerful. And I want to say I really understand the urge to standardize things in a way it's easier, in a way
Right.
it's more objective, but
Manageable. You can manage it better.
can manage like lots of groups of people, but in other ways it can be so damaging. I'm thinking of like
Yes.
SATs, like
Yes.
being the kind of one of the be all end alls to higher
Yes.
education, and how that can even be super damaging for people of color and Black folks.
Yeah, in my education courses, they even called it a snapshot. It's only a snapshot of what you know.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's a snapshot that's frankly based on like Western, like expectations
Yes.
and ideals. I had
Yes.
another conversation with one of my other friends on here, and she is a psychologist. Her name is Dr. Chanda, and she was talking about like IQ tests and how they're based on like Western norms, and how, you know, there's certain words when she was testing a child on an IQ test, and I can't remember what the word is, but she read out a word and the child had to define it. And the child defined it totally accurately in their culture, like what
Yes.
in their culture. And
Yes.
we had to score it as wrong. But that doesn't mean that
Hmm.
the child's less like smart.
No, it doesn't. No, it
It
doesn't.
means that the child isn't as like Westernized or
Right.
Western, you know, like adhering to Western education.
Mhm.
But their IQ score is lower because of that, and
Always,
problematic.
because of the way the IQ test is even set up.
Yeah,
You know, that's why in California, at least, you can't even give IQ tests to Black children
oh,
because of the way the tests are set up. Yes.
I'm glad.
And I'm going to recommend, before I forget, a wonderful book that I came across in my teacher education courses that really spoke to my soul. It is by an author named Lisa Delpit, and it is called Other People's Children. I highly recommend that anybody read that book, because as a teacher, I learned that I am a parent. It's called in parentis loco, which means that I am to think of that child as I would my own child as I'm teaching. And you'd be surprised how many times that does not happen.
Yeah.
You know, students a lot of times are victims of verbal aggressions, microaggressions,
Mm-hmm.
and we're expecting them to know how to handle those types of things. So I definitely recommend that book.
Yeah, I mean, that's wonderful to hear that there's information being put out there.
Yes.
It just makes me think of like the mental health connection, right? How so many
Yes.
students are suffering from mental health. We've talked in previous episodes about racial trauma and how racial
Hmm.
trauma really starts early, and how it really affects, like when it's affecting children. I think that it makes sense why children of color have these like symptoms that seem like
Yes.
they're acting out, or that seem like
Yes.
angry or really sad, and that could be seen as like problematic children in the classroom. We need
Yes.
to dig deeper than that too,
Oh, yes.
by treating them
I believe
as
that I believe that children are brilliant.
mm,
And I believe that this current generation and maybe about the generation before it, people that are around 35 and younger, I believe they came with a specific purpose to disrupt the system.
mm,
That's my own spiritual belief. Like, I really believe that. And as soon as they're given an opportunity to speak out and say something, they are shut down systematically. But I have this dream of having a school one day, and I dream of, at the end of the day, after the kids are done with school, I dream of being able to ask them, what did you already know before someone tried to teach you today?
yeah.
What did you already know? What if we started thinking of children as having come here with a purpose, and we need to question them and interview them and find out how we can be of service to them? What about that?
Definitely. I love that. I love that you have that philosophy as an educator,
Yes.
as a teacher. I think there should be more teachers out there that have that as well, of realizing that there's strength in children, and every
Right.
child brings something to the table. That's amazing.
Yes.
I'm also reading
I
another question here.
Mhm.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I wanted to make sure to say what Deuce Thoughts said, which is simply the problem in our system is that there's no system. I find that to be true in many ways, especially for teachers, because they give us a lot of busy work. There's a lot of busy work, but that'll be another time. Inbox me if you want to know more. Go on, Laura.
I also just want to say, yeah, if we didn't answer any questions, feel free to
Please.
inbox either of us as well, and
Mhm.
we'll be happy to start this conversation. I know for me, and I'm sure Michelee feels this too, more discussion, more conversation, more awareness about these issues is so essential. So I'd be really
Mhm.
happy to just have a conversation about these things.
Yes.
And I'm seeing another question saying, as an educator, other than socioeconomic gap, do you think that race contributes to the academic gap?
I definitely do, but in ways that we might not understand. Like you said, there are standardized tests that are set up culturally and ethnically,
Mm-hmm.
um, there's already a disparity. Well, that's a buzzword, a disparity. The way that some children communicate culturally is not respected. So yes, I mean, as long as we're doing any type of standardized test that does not respect a child's inherent knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
I believe so.
Yeah.
Like I said, you might as well call me an unorthodox teacher. You might as well put me in that little box, because I feel like children already know. I feel like they're born knowing. They are not empty slates
Mm-hmm.
that are ready to be written on. I'm not sure if I answered that question. How about you? What do you think, Laura?
Yeah, I really agree with all of what you said. And I also will add that there is such a thing as teacher bias, and there is such a thing as clinician bias as well. And I learned this
Yes.
so profoundly when I was working in an ADHD lab a while ago, and really realizing how much the lenses of teachers and clinicians can also
Yes.
biased and influenced by the system that we have, the racist system or the white supremacy system, whatever you want to call it,
Right.
is. And one striking example of this is that for clinicians, a lot of Black children are being diagnosed with things like oppositional defiant disorder, conduct disorder, all of these
Mine was.
things that really
Yes.
kind of point to the fact that, like, oh, they're, like young psychopaths, or they have,
There's something wrong with them. That's how they say it.
yeah,
I knew something was wrong
something
with
wrong
him.
with them. Yeah. And
Yeah.
just really like villainizing these children in a sense, because
Yes.
OCD, essentially, the symptoms are just not obeying, talking back.
Right.
But when clinicians see white children, and this is statistical, there's studies based on this. When
Wow.
clinicians see white children, they're more likely to diagnose the same exact symptoms as
Uh-huh.
ADHD, which is
Right.
commonly understood as like a neurodevelopmental disorder, like, oh,
Right.
like different brain changes, rather than
Right.
basing that on their problematic behavior. And
Right.
I think that just goes to show that there's bias, and every
Definitely.
bias in how clinicians treat children. There's bias
Yes.
in how teachers treat children, as
Yes.
you see in the classroom. When
Yes.
a child of color acts out, they get punishment, whereas
Yes.
a white child acts out, they get,
He's just having a moment.
yeah, yeah,
He gets like that. He's just like that.
yeah.
And I can't even tell you, even on my job, when there are certain, people of certain races, it's like, oh, they're just like that. And I have verbally said, I have to do my job. Could you imagine me saying I'm just like that?
Yeah.
And in the profession that I work, I'm not in the classroom, so I get to see many different classrooms. And I promise you, at least 45 to 50% of those classes, there's a little Black boy sitting in the corner.
Mm-hmm.
And this is just got to change. If it's that drastic, I really feel that those types of children, I also feel like it's a travesty that, Black children, Black boys can go their entire elementary, middle school, and high school academic career without a Black male teacher. I feel that does something, even if he's gruff, even if he's abrasive. I feel like you need to have one. You need to have somebody that looks like you.
Totally, yeah. And I love that you brought that point up, because it really hits home to some of my own personal experiences. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with the term internalized racism. I definitely felt a lot of that growing up, not being
Mhm.
around any Asian teachers, any Asian
Right?
role models, any Asian peers. I lived in a
Right.
white neighborhood. And as a result of that, it really affected my mental health, because I started really hating my Asianness. I didn't
Mhm.
like my hair, I didn't like my nose, I didn't like my
Mhm.
features because they were too Asian. And
Mhm.
so I started to really just hate my own identity. And I think it's so sad when someone starts hating their own identity, because
Yes.
apparently who they are, right? They
Yes.
can't really
Yes.
change that, even though beauty standards have really tried to, like, do skin bleaching and eye surgery and
Just
hair
painful.
straightening.
That just hurts me because I love my little sis. She's so cute. Look at her. She's so cute. No, I went through that too. I used to straighten my hair and it would almost fall out because my hair is really fine. And, I would have friends that had coarser hair and they could press their hair or whatever. So I was kind of in the middle in some ways with the whole hair issue. And I was just a short person. There are just always ways that you're going to be different. But the internalized racism definitely comes into play in the classroom. And I feel like the educational system has to change that. And with textbooks, my friend, with textbooks, I'm on a personal mission to get these textbooks changed. I still don't know how that's going to look or how I'm going to do that, but it's ridiculous the way that they promulgate all of these racist beliefs and ideas.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm also noticing that we have about 10 minutes left.
Okay. Are there any questions? Or what do you want to do?
So I know that we kind of talking about reverse racism on here, or talking about how to communicate with other people or how to respond to other people when they're, saying things that are damaging or racist or harmful. So what would you prefer to talk about here? I think
I prefer to go through the comments.
Sure, yeah.
Is that okay with you?
Yeah, of course.
While we have everyone here, I love that Healing Reminder said, drum roll, white men. Sorry, we got to say it. We got to say it. It's true. It pervades everything. Let me see. What else do we have?
I think something that Healing Reminders always says is that they said, I think the entry requirements for grad school also prohibit people of color from entering the mental health field. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. Even a person of color that, for me, that can be, categorized as like somewhat privileged. I had a lot of obstacles when I was entering grad school. It took me a lot of time. The system is set up in so many ways where like entry requirements such as the admission costs or like the cost to even apply. I spent near like probably $1,000, $2,000 just applying to different grad schools and interviews and things like that. When you want to try to get into competitive programs, you're expected to fly to these intervies, and who's going to do that but you, right? So I
never thought about that.
I paid for housing, and just like the other requirements such as like, GRE exams. We're kind of talking about that boat of like standardized testing. We're talking GPA. We're talking writing skills when you're doing applications, all of these statements that you're doing. It's so hard. It seems like everything is pitted against you, especially when you're a person of color trying to get into the mental health profession. And for me, I was like, the other more Asian therapists and more health professionals, but how are we going to do that if everything makes it so hard to do that?
Right.
Yeah.
That is really interesting. I never thought about that, but from my perspective, when I was in high school, I learned because my husband and I went to high school together, and we married, much later, but we learned that our high school guidance counselor was actually trying to steer the Black students towards junior colleges and away from four-year universities. And that alone, my mother was just, I didn't understand at the time, but she was livid. And I was like, well, why not? I was only 16 when I graduated. I'm like, well, why not? What's the problem with it? But consistently lower expectations, always lowering the expectations. And so with that in mind, many of my peers may not have even, some of them have gone on to be college professors and really have some pretty heavy duty, weighty jobs. They're doing some really amazing things with their lives. But just the thought that you would specifically target African American students and tell them that they need to go to a junior college and tell everyone else that they should go to a 4-year university. That doesn't even get to the point where they're applying for, the mental health fields, because then they don't even go to a 4-year university. It's not even something that they consider they can do.
Yeah.
So, wow. Do you see how this conversation right now brings the pieces together? We talk about, why are there fewer people of color in these college programs? Well, how many more throughout these generations were stopped by their guidance counselors, like tried to happen with me, and then as for you, like, I did not know that it was that costly in order to get into that particular field.
Yeah. And then you're talking, I mean, I think it's just so heartbreaking too. I don't know much about this subject, but what is it? The school to prison pipeline for
Yes,
people.
I was just thinking about that.
Yeah. And I think that's just, you have to really understand that, yeah, as we've said over and over again in this talk, the system is so much against Black folks and people of color. And people, this is what I hope to educate to people, the difference between equality and equity. And I think there's a clear difference here, because equality is saying, like, oh, give everyone, the same benefits, the same advantages, give everyone, we need to treat everyone the same. But equality really ignores the history of what has been done in the past. And in the past, the reality is that Black folks have been disadvantaged to such a great extent. Exactly what you said, discouragement from guidance counselors, just so many systemic levels. And so equity really allows like more advantages for those advantaged groups. And a lot of people have strong reactions to that. They're like, oh, well, I earned my way, and why
I know
getting a free school?
I had to pull myself up by my bootstraps.
Yeah, but you have to really.
But one thing that I do see in schools that I think also causes a problem is this whole "I'm gonna go to college" rally. Now, I'm not even talking racially speaking. Everybody does not have to be forced to go to college. That's not like, you know what I'm saying? Trade school is a really good thing for some people. Like, we're talking about those ADHD types and those types of people. They need more hands-on work. And I don't think that work should be limited and discounted and, thought of as inferior, because it is not inferior work. Welding is not anything that's inferior. And so, as we can see, even when it comes to going to college, there's this whole rally in elementary school sometime. Well, what are you doing after school? Going to college. Who's going to fund that?
Yeah.
And what are the obstacles to a person of color getting there? Not saying that should not be a goal. Yet again, I'm not asking to lower the standards, but see, if everybody went by my principle and asked those babies, what did you come here to learn? How much of this ridiculousness will we cut out in the first place? They already know what they want to learn. They're born knowing what their purpose is. Why should you be like me and spend 40 to 50 years coming back full circle to what your purpose is?
Yeah.
Allow them to tell us what their purpose is, and then we fit their education to that.
Yeah.
If America really cared about its citizens and about being great, it would do that. College shouldn't cost anything.
Yes, 100%. I know. Don't even want to get into the realm of like the atrocious like student loans in this country or in both countries.
Another form of slavery. Just said it. Yeah.
So I'm getting a countdown, Michelee.
Oh, really? Wow. Why does it always go so fast? I know. Sad.
I'm definitely.
But we will talk about those things next time. We can start with the things that you were talking about.
Definitely. Yeah.
I just always like to honor the crowd.
And honor the promises that we made, for sure.
Yes.
And I just want to say to everyone, feel free to send questions even throughout the week. We'll try to get to them. And if we haven't gotten to them already in our old videos, we have like a running Google Doc right now where we like
Yeah.
all the questions, and we really try hard to get to them because we know that
Right.
education is so essential. So please shoot us your questions if they weren't answered in today's chat. And yeah, what else, Michelee? We have
Nothing, just
30 seconds.
that's I love you in sign language.
Is it that?
We need to love each other more, people. Let's love each other.
Aw, love
That's
that.
going to settle a whole lot right there.
Yes. Thank you for connecting with me today.
You're welcome.
And thank you everyone for tuning in. I'm loving all these just amazing comments here and all the insights. Yeah, and we'll see you next week. Same time.
Okay,
same
save it to IG. Don't forget, save
Yes.
to IGTV.
Yes, I will do that.
Okay,
All
see you
right.
soon. Bye.
Bye.